I'd like to get started sort of at the end of the beginning or the middle or the beginning of a new beginning. And that's actually Oscar night in March 1976. Because you tell a great story about winning, you won that Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for Shampoo. And tell us what was going through your mind that night and how that led you to making this work.
Well, you know, I'd been blacklisted from the time I was 24 to the time I was 36, which is really a Hollywood actor's lifetime in film. And I was 49 when I was nominated and won finally for Shampoo. And I realized walking up to get the Oscar that it was probably the end of my great, beautiful, gorgeous 12 years in Hollywood, where all of those, it was a time when all of the directors were so smart and so liberal, and Hal Ashby and Coppola, and just bringing a whole new life into Hollywood to give me, you know, all of those years that I'd lost. I realized that as an actor, as a woman actor, that my career was probably really over. And what was coming up next was not going to be anything that I really wanted to do, or that as an actor I would feel that I could grow with. Yeah. And I got a call from AFI, and it was after I'd done the film about the Jews in the boat. What was the name of it?
Voyage of the Damned.
Huh?
Voyage of the Damned.
The Voyage of the Damned. Voyage of the Damned. And they called it and said they're going to have their first women's directing workshop. And did I know anybody who would like to do it? And, you know, I thought, and, you know, I was in the colony, thought Diane Cannon would be good. And then I thought, me. And it absolutely gave me the rest of my life.
Oh my
because
God.
You know what happens to old women actors in Hollywood. I mean, it's a plunge down, and you never can get up again. Maybe you get a series, a comedy series, you know, and I was offered one, but that's the rest of your life. You do that one character and get paid at the end of the week, and that's not what my life was about. And so I made The Stronger, which was a Strindberg, a half-hour piece at AFI, and they liked it so much they made it in film and in color, and it won a prize. And the camera person on that was Andy Davis, who is a great director himself now. And so I was given a person on camera to work with that kind of set up who I would work with for all the rest of my directing days, that I had a partner who knew more about the camera than I did, since I was always in front of it. Mm-hmm. And so The Stronger won a prize. And I was sitting in the theater when it was over, feeling, you know, very cocky about myself, when Barbara Koppel's documentary came on. And I was stunned.
And that would have been Harlan County, right?
Harlan County, USA. I was stunned. I had never seen anything like that. And of course, the things in my life so related to coming out and talking about the, you know, all these things. It was like I had a voice, And for the first time, I could use it and say, look what's happening here, look what's happening there. And so it changed my life. I knew then. And so the AFI just picked me up out of the pit and gave me a new life, really.
And you were immediately drawn. I had a little line written, which is, how does Yova Rosenthal from land of Wilmer, Minnesota?
Little Yova Rosenthal. Yeah. Well, my friend Mary Beth Yarrow, who was married to Peter Yarrow then, showed me an item in the newspaper about these 8 women who went on strike against the bank in Wilmer, Minnesota, because the boss of the bank, the president of the bank, was telling them to train these boys to know all about their jobs, and then made the boys the bosses of these women. And so they went on strike in the winter, and it's 40 degrees below zero in Wilmer, Minnesota. When I was questioning people in the street, I couldn't move my mouth. And so that was the opening. That was it. And they didn't win, but I did. We got to show them. We got to show what it was, and it changed banking forever.
That's
Judy
right.
Judy Irola was the camera person on that. And she was just, a teacher.
Well, what's so amazing is for people that have been attending AFI DOCS this week, there's a wonderful documentary. I think it played all day today, the 9 to 5 Story of a Movement documentary by Steve Bogner.
Yes, right. Absolutely.
Details that also deals with the women in the banking industry in Ohio. And
that's right. That's right.
And your movie was so galvanizing at that time. But one of my favorite scenes in that film is it's 2 gatherings of different groups of women. One are the striking women. Yes. They're meeting and supporting one another. And one of them is going through a really hard time, and they're trying to find a way to support her. And then you're intercutting with a poker game that's being played by kind of the women in town that were more pro-management and weren't necessarily supporting the strikers. And it's so sensitively done. And to me, it's such a reflection of how beautifully how you gained that trust, how you got into that little town.
Well, I gotta confess to you, Anne, I was staying at the house of the women who were critical of the girls who were protesting against the bank. That was Mary Beth's mother's house.
Literally and figuratively.
Right. So I woke up to that poker game, and it was right there for me to have a yummy time with.
Amazing. But tell us a little bit about how you develop those relationships, because you can't just parachute into a place and get that kind of honesty and intimacy. And as people notice in your clip reel, you work very intimately with your subjects.
I think that I walk through into a world. Maybe that's because I'm an actor. I walk through into a world and enter it. And I have, with all of my documentaries, I so identify with the people I'm talking to that for me, it's a new world and a new adventure. And I'm so curious and I'm so fervent about being a part of that world that I don't even have to think about it. It's my new living place. It's my new habitat.
Well, when we were chatting the other day to prepare for this, I think the way you put it was, you never looked back. You said, I never looked back. I fell out of love with acting. And this was your new mode of intellectual expression, emotional expression. I mean, this was your new art form.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it
was, what an adventure. What an adventure. This wasn't a movie set. where you go on, you go to the trailer, you come back, although there's a lot of excitement in it. But what an adventure to go into a new world each time and be accepted and wanted in that new world. Don't forget that during the time that I was blacklisted, we had a very, very self-contained life. So, breaking the boundaries of that time was thrilling to me.
I'm going to jump around a little bit in time and go to Down and Out in America, which we saw a clip of in that beautiful montage, and which is on view at AFI DOCS. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers have already seen it or are planning to see it later tonight. But I do urge everyone to see this. It was made at the height of Reagan America. I'm going to touch later on how very prescient, you can tell from that collection how prescient you have been. I mean, every single one of those films could be shown today. They're illuminating something
absolutely
that we're talking about and is so important today. And in this case, it was poverty. But what struck me about Down and Out in America was that you were intersectional before we used the term intersectional, because you were talking to men and women, and you were talking across race and class, and maybe most importantly, rural and urban. You were really kind of covering a lot of, you were very inclusive in your vision of how those policies were affecting Americans.
Well, I had a crew of producers, of women who have been friends of mine, like Mary Beth, like Roberta Morris, like Virginia Kotz, who did a lot of that groundwork before I ever got there, so that the work that was put in by those producers in our company set up this whole world, so that when I went there, I was going into a place that I was familiar with, but totally new.
Yeah.
When we went to the people who had the farms and were being dispossessed of their farms, I don't have those bankers who just, faced them and threw them all and took their land away right in front of our camera. It was a privilege for me to see these heroes, their heroes. It was something I felt so privileged to be able to go into, to know them, much less film them.
But again, to do that, though, they had to trust you, because you're seeing a lot of these people on the worst days of their lives.
Yes, absolutely.
The day after the worst day of their life. And I think, and it's almost as if your producers, and I really appreciate your crediting those producers, because it takes a village, to make these things happen that look spontaneous, but in a way, it almost feels like they were helping you cast. I mean, you are
absolutely
casting a documentary with characters.
Absolutely. I didn't go into a strange place in the middle of the country and look around. There were people for me to choose from.
Right.
And the choices I was given were superlative.
They are unforgettable. They're just absolutely unforgettable. And when you see this film, you're haunted by these families, these young people, older people. I mean, it's just, they're so resonant and vivid. And I also, by this time, I mean, you've made films in between Wilmer 8 and Down and Out in America, which we'll talk about. But I also wanted to lift up your style. I mean, tell us a little bit about finding your style, because your style it's verite in many ways. It's investigative, but it's also deeply personal. It's almost like an essayistic form in terms of your own narration. So I just think you've hit this beautiful sweet spot of documentary styles. And I wondered how self-conscious that was on your part, or was it instinct?
I'm not even aware of an approach or a style. I so identify, maybe because of my background as an actor or a teacher, I so identify with who I'm talking to and what's coming at me, that whatever style there is comes out of my identification with what's being said to me and my true shock at what's going on with this person. And in addition to that, the camera person, it was Tom Hurwitz, who was one of the great cameramen, and all of the cameramen who worked with me on documentaries were not good. They were great cameramen. And so I never had to think about that except to connect with the person in front of me, because my partner, who was on camera, was doing the work for me. He was covering the whole thing.
So your work is just total emotional engagement with that human being. And, you know, I often, when I'm reviewing a film and the acting is the most difficult thing to quantify and to sort of describe about, but I use the term emotional instrument a lot. It's almost like you're the emotional instrument here too, right? I mean, you're kind of letting them channel through you what they need to communicate to the world, and their pain, really, in most of these cases. I was also surprised, you know, I always knew that you were blacklisted. I was familiar with the history with the McCarthy hearings. And then I think you and I must have crossed paths very briefly in the 80s when I worked at Ms. Magazine. You know, you've always been a great feminist and an activist, and I've always admired you for your political engagement. But I always thought that started back in the blacklist days, but then I've learned that wasn't necessarily true, that you weren't particularly ideological. It wasn't because you were an ideological person back in the 50s.
Well, I married a communist writer, and I came from a liberal Jewish home, and I was a kid.
Yeah.
Very uneducated. I'd been to the neighborhood playhouse, so I was an educated actor, but I was not an educated person. And I liked those people. I respected them. There was something about them that was very, very attractive to me. They were intellectuals, and I hadn't known any intellectuals. I myself didn't become a communist because I didn't understand it. And it didn't make any sense to me. But I certainly respected my husband's friends and my girlfriends, Gladys Schwartz. I mean, they were people who taught me about fairness, about life. I mean, I always had that sense. Yeah. But I would never have traded acting for the experience that I had for being part of that family. Mm-hmm. And it formed me as a person. I mean, I grew up, I was blacklisted from the time I was 24 to the time I was 36. So I was a grown-up girl when Hollywood discovered me again. And I had, very strong ideas of my own by that time.
Gotcha. We saw a clip there of the documentary When Women Kill from 1983, which again, so prescient. I was sort of flashing on Orange is the New Black, right? I mean,
yes,
you
absolutely.
were ahead of that curve.
Yeah.
But one of the interview subjects in that film was Leslie Van Houten, who was convicted of murder of they were called the La Bianca murders. And she was a member of the Charles Manson cult. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to ask you, because you worked with Sharon Tate on Valley of the Dolls, and it's a tenuous connection, but there is that tragedy that you have in common with Van Houten. And I'm just wondering how that kind of informed your relationship with her, if it ever came up, if it, I don't know, just walk us through that a little bit.
Well, when you meet Leslie Van Houten, Leslie Van Houten presents herself as a victim. You know, if I hadn't met Charlie, I never would have done that. I really am a little girl. I'm not a grown person. And I need help and guidance. Please get me out of here because I shouldn't be here. But she had nothing to do with Sharon's murder, but she went into a house and there was a perfectly wonderful woman who she put her knife into, as did that other Manson girl, what's her name, who was in the same prison. Sharon was an extraordinary young woman. And she was madly in love with, what's his name? The director.
Roman Polanski.
Roman. She was madly in love with Roman Polanski, and she was pregnant. And to even bring her up with a Manson girl would be a sacrilege. She was a very private person. She was in love. She had a very, very wonderful life with friends. And the horror of what happened to her.
Yeah. I was reading through the reviews of that particular film, and the guy in the New York Times sort of not accused you, but commented that he felt that you were not judgmental enough, that you were letting these women off the hook.
Oh,
and I
really?
But I thought that was so interesting because I didn't feel that way at all. And it's a common mistake that I think people make, which is to present is to endorse, right? Or even to attempt to understand is to endorse. And I felt like you were, as a matter of fact, even in that interview with her, you said, but you had a choice. I mean,
absolutely.
You were not a passive, you were not complicit with their own justification.
Well, she was begging us to, talk to the judges, to talk to the warden, to speed up her time in jail so that she could get out. I mean, that was why she was so charming and submissive. But if you see the documentaries that I make, and you have, that I don't accuse anybody of anything.
Right.
I have to get close to them in order to open them up and in order for them to talk to me. So, and she was, in her own way, she felt she was the victim. Right. She felt she was the victim of Charlie Manson. And of course, maybe she was. But my approach to her was to be open enough for her to talk to me.
Right. And
to tell her you had a choice. You didn't have to raise that knife and kill that woman, but you did.
Well, again, I just think I'm wondering, as an actor, did you, as you're making your films, as you're beginning to your life and career as a documentarian, was your own presence an issue of like how present to be? Should you, did you
never
kind of make a decision? I don't want to be on camera, or
I would lose. I was not on camera, or very rarely.
Yeah.
I was caught maybe sometimes.
Right. Yes, it was incidental.
But the concentration was always on the person I was talking to. And that's what I felt comfortable with.
And again, these people that are so unforgettable, once we meet them, we don't forget them. I'm sure you haven't. Did you ever stay in touch with any of your subjects, or did you look back around or see how they were doing?
No. I did with What Sex Am I for a while. The two women, the one who is you know, a kind of burlesque dancer, the beautiful
Beautiful.
young woman. What's her name?
Kathy.
Kathy, you see her with her mother, you know, picking her up from the, you know, with Kathy and her girlfriend. They were here for dinner. But you know, most of the people I met in What Sex Am I, who were in that section of the film died. Kathy died. Her friend died.
Right.
That's when what's the illness?
AIDS.
That's when AIDS took over. You know, so all those beautiful, fascinating,
Brave.
hunky, cute, you know, trances gone.
Right. Courageous. These
Yeah.
are pioneers. I mean, again with your prescience.
Yeah, I remember we did the scene in the bar, and it's in the documentary, and this tall transvestite, you know, gorgeous woman says to me, you know, just because I have a dick doesn't make me any less of a woman. And you hear me say, I know, because she was absolutely right. You know, it didn't make her any less of a woman. She was like, really.
Put that on the bumper sticker. It's so simple and clear. And, you know, of course, now they were called transsexuals and transvestites. That would be today, in today's term, transgender and cross-dressing. But
yeah, we've come a long way.
We have come, I mean,
we've come a long way, baby.
That value of that film, though. Now, was that for HBO? Tell me, are these commissions or are these subjects that you pursued out of your own interest?
Oh, these are my choices. They were all my choices, and of course, my husband, Joey Fioretti, was the pushing force behind them. He got HBO to do the films. He'd act up for Sheila Nevins and make her laugh, and Sheila Nevins was a great HBO executive, and Joey produced all of those, and so, you know, we're a partnership.
Are there, when you look back on those films, again, any one of them could be shown today or made today or had a sequel today that would be utterly of this time, but is there one in particular that you feel would be worth redoing or revisiting just in these days?
Down and Out now.
Which one, honey?
Down and Out.
Down and Out.
World now.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Down and Out in America. I mean, we're in a place now. Well, I don't need to say where we are now. I mean, it's the monster is, you know, it's like the Kazan movie, A Face in the Crowd. You know,
speaking of
great Kazan movie,
yeah,
where all of a sudden this, you know, this clown gets, you know, charms the people and gets to be in a place of power, where, you know, you end up where you don't know where you are anymore, and it's weird.
It's
so
yeah.
We're hoping, aren't we?
If Elia Kazan and Patty Chayefsky and you know, all those seers.
Yes, you got them. Kazan and Chayefsky.
Or Bud Schulberg, you know, if they could.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Fantasies that they concocted, you know, are not.
Absolutely.
All too
mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Right.
You said something so interesting the other day about finding your voice, about documentaries giving you a voice that you had really had to submerge for many years during that period when you came back to Hollywood. Could you talk about that a little bit? About having to just like really keep things and, you know, keep things bottled up.
Well, the the years, during the 12 years, you know, I went in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee and I took the fifth. And the committee was always after me, not to just name names, because I wasn't in the Communist Party, but to name my husband. And so the horror of that committee to make that request of me to name my husband in order to work in television or movies, I mean, it speaks of the bizarre kind of the Roy Cohenness of that whole time. Yeah. And so when I got to Hollywood, because that 12 years was over and then the hippies were in. When the hippies came in, Hollywood changed. There was sun. They were laughing. They were dancing in the streets. They were doing coke. They were sniffing, smoking. It was such a free opposite to the blacklist period. But I was still kind of scared because I'd had to shut up for so long that you worried if you open your mouth that somebody's name is going to come out and hurt them. Yeah. You know, so getting to the documentaries was such a kind of door slamming open for me, where I could ask anything, I could say anything, and I could address some of the things that I felt deeply about in a very real way. These documentaries live. You know, I made Down and Out in America when, 20, 30 years ago?
Oh, and P.S., I don't think we've yet said it won the Oscar.
Yeah, yeah, it did. Yeah,
I mean,
it won an Oscar.
And at a time.
And one of the other films that I made a film for television, won the Directors Guild Award. And at that time, you know, those were all boys.
Right, you were the first
one. The boys who gave me the Directors Guild Award, I mean, that was, whoa. I was the girl in the room, you know?
Fabulous.
Pretty cool.
Now, there's one movie that we didn't see a clip of that I don't think we even can see, called Women on Trial.
Oh, yeah.
What's the story? That has an interesting little backstory, if I'm not mistaken.
It really does. We heard about these judges in Texas who, when a mother went in front of the judge and said, I would like to take visitation rights from my husband, who I am not with anymore because I think my child is being violated in some way. The judge would take that child, in this case, the first case was a 4-year-old, away from the mother and give them to the father without allowing the mother to have any contact with the child from then on. Hello? Hello? Now this happened in 3 cases with 3 different judges that we filmed, and I spoke to all the judges. You know, why do you take these children away from the mothers and give them to the fathers who are abusing them, and not let the mothers say, oh no, I knew when she was in front of me, I knew she was crazy. I knew she was crazy. I have an instinct about that. That child shouldn't be with that mother. The bizarreness of these men who were in power and able to wreck a woman's life, and you wreck a woman's life when you take her child away from her. And you know, we were sued and they won, so that HBO had to pay over $1 million as a settlement. So we have that documentary, but I can't show it
Ah,
because we could be sued again and we don't have $1 million.
right.
And HBO already paid, so they don't have the $1 million to cover us. But that's one, you know, when we had the documentary show at Film Forum, Roberta and I, who is another one of my great producers, tried to figure out a way of showing this, because you watch it and you're amazed. You watch it and you can't believe what's happening there.
And again, separating families, we're living, you know,
Yes,
it rings, everything
absolutely.
resonates. There's always
Absolutely.
a present day. I wanted to ask you about that. I couldn't help noticing, and I think this is going to have to be my last question, unfortunately.
Oh, no. Oh, Anne, I love you.
Um, darling, we'll talk later.
Okay. We'll talk later.
But the name of your production company is Hope Runs High.
That's how the documentaries are being distributed
Oh, I see.
on the virtual cinema.
I
Oh,
see.
is that the virtual cinema name? Well,
Yeah.
anyway, everything has Hope Runs High, and that all, you know, it just buoyed me. And I was just wondering, Lee Grant, font of all wisdom, font of all inspiration, what are we to do? I mean, when you kind of observe present day and our reality now and the position of the artist, and especially the nonfiction filmmakers, I know we have a lot of documentary makers watching this, and if you would like to offer some words of wisdom, advice, encouragement, this, I'm sure they would love to hear it.
Well, there are great documentaries being made, great documentaries. And I am so grateful to all the younger, older, very old, heartfelt documentarians who are out there saying, this is the truth. This is what I can tell you. This is what's really happening, because there's so much hoopa, loopa, loopa, loopa going on to come between what is really happening and the streamers that are being thrown up to divert and take us away from the truth. So carry on, my young friends and my old friends, carry on. It's a great privilege, you know, great privilege.
I would only add, watch Lee Grant's films to see how it's done, because you're truly a master of this form. Your work endures, and you are a force of nature, and long may your force be with us, because we need you. And we thank you for being here. Thank you, Lee.
Gosh, thank you.